listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11 Monday through Friday. Welcome back to the Martha Zoller Show. We are so happy to have back with us David Dunning. He does York Radio in the UK, has worked for the BBC, and really gives us some great insight on how stories are covered in the UK. I met him on a bench in York last summer, and so it's great to have you back. Welcome, David.
Hello again. It's good to be back too.
So a couple of things that we're going to talk about today, but the first one is this case of Henry Nowak, or Novak. It's with a W, but I think it's pronounced as a V. It was a murder that happened in Southampton in December. The case against the perpetrator was done and finished up this week, right? This week or last week it was finished up. And the person was convicted. And after that, and I think this has to do a little bit with the British legal system, that they don't have as much coverage during trials that we do. And then it seems like a lot of this is opened up since the verdict. So just give us a little background on that.
Yeah, I think the crucial word is we do coverage, but we as journalists don't do comment. Right. You must be very careful not to do a contempt of court. So you don't discuss innocence or guilt, which I think you can do in the United States as a trial is going on or before a trial. We don't do that. There's also a lot of information that is restricted as well. If it hasn't appeared before a jury, it can't appear in the media. But once you have a conviction, then it, everything starts to come out. So
we have to say allegedly, if we're going to say we think
someone. Do, that's right. Yes.
Yeah, allegedly. Yeah.
And we have to use allegedly when reporting a lot of a trial as well. So anyway, what's come out now, and I'm sure some people watching this will have seen video clips of the way that the police went about the operation. You'll have seen the handcuffing and all that. So now we have a situation in the UK where people are very concerned and many people are very angry about the police response. There is always two sides to the story, and policing is a very difficult job. But last night, it actually led, and yesterday as well, it actually led to scenes of demonstrations in the city of Southampton. And those turned violent. I think 11 police officers were hurt and 2 people were arrested. One thing I've seen is coverage from the perspective of the neighbours, because everybody, the protesters converged on the address of the murderer. And it's very interesting to see the reaction of the neighbours, because it's quite a tight-knit residential area. It's an area I actually personally know very well, because I worked as a journalist in Southampton and I actually went to school in that area as well. So those are streets that I used to walk around when I was going to secondary school. Just to give you a little idea of that area as well, I think whenever you see riots on the street and trouble like that, it always gives you an impression of what an area might be like. But I can tell you that this is a predominantly homeowner area. I was doing a little bit of research today. Interestingly, a 3-bed family home in that area will cost you something like $330,000. So I think that's the equivalent to an entry-level price for a property in Gainesville in Georgia. It's an area described as uniquely young and also highly educated. 25% of the population are students, 75% identify as white, and 78% of people in that area are actually single as well. So there's a few facts about the St Denis and Portswood area of Southampton. So last night, as I said, it is difficult at the moment to say who actually attended the demonstration, because already it's got political, and already we have accusations towards the right of politics for stirring up trouble. And they are saying that they are purely expressing their concerns about two-tier policing, and also
So,
about the what.
so it does seem though that whether you go all the way back to George Floyd protests or we had in the Atlanta Police Training Center last year, we had a lot of these types of protests. And what happened was it was you talk about two-tier policing, which we'll talk about in a moment. It was like two-tier protesting. What was happening was the initial protesters, and this appears like this is what happened in Southampton yesterday because I did follow it. We have some very good friends that live in Netley, so they're not too far away from all of this.
Mhm.
But you saw that the early protesters were, I mean, they were unhappy, but they weren't tearing up property or they weren't being violent, and they were just unhappy and they were responding to that. And then as the day went on and even nightfall, then it gets worse. I had a pastor friend who worked in the community on social justice issues. He said he called it the second shift, you know, that the people that would initially come out would be kind of your typical protesters that, you know, are upset about something and they show up organically. Then you have the kind of paid stuff. Was it like that, you think, last night?
Well, there were two protests. One was outside Southampton Central Police Station. And obviously, a police station is easier in terms of controlling the crowd. And that protest was an angry group of people, but a group of people that didn't cause trouble. But then it moved to the family home of the murderer. And that's when the police not only had to protect the property of the family, but also of the neighbours as well, because, as I said, it's tightly built residential properties. When you look at the damage to neighbours' property already, I mean, one woman in St Denis Road had both her cars smashed up, and she's nothing to do with it at all. And
Right.
neither are the other neighbours as well. Protesters stormed through the gardens of a flat on the corner of Belmont Road and St Denis Road. So the police had to change their tactics, and they had to change the way that they protected those homes there. And that's when everything started to escalate.
So let's talk about why the anger occurred, and it has to do with policing. You know, we had there had been this indication in the trial, and some stories talked a little bit about how this young man ended up being handcuffed, but it was yesterday or the day before that the body cam video was released. And it seems to me, I'm not a law enforcement person, but it seems to me that when you come across a scene like that, that at that time was not chaotic. There was a guy standing over here saying he had been racially attacked and he was pointing to a bruise. And then there's the victim that was on the ground. There was blood on the ground, I understand. And it seems to me that there didn't need to be, it looked like they were roughing up the victim. That's what it looked like to me. I'm not a police officer. And it seems to me the first thing you do is you give medical aid. And they didn't do that. And what happened was this guy is saying, I was stabbed. Um, the police officer said some things that seemed a little heartless, I mean, at the time. And then he says, I can't breathe, which is, of course, reminiscent in America of the George Floyd situation. And then he ended up dying in handcuffs, it appears, from the body cam. And is that what angered everybody? Because that seems to me what I couldn't understand.
Well, yes, obviously, the way that the police body cam images play is what has angered everybody. Something wasn't right there. The way that that operation was carried out, I think it's been accepted by the police, wasn't right. Um, there are a number of different viewpoints here about what should have happened. The fact that him saying that he had been stabbed should have been taken more seriously. And the thing is that most of us, the majority of us, weren't there. We've only got this footage, and the police complaints procedure really has to now be allowed time to try and get to the bottom of what happened, and whether there was blame, whether there was confusion. Uh, Most sensible people, I think, will now wait to see what the complaints procedure comes up with. Obviously, there are some people who have no faith in that. You know, the police always have their critics, and there are a lot of people who don't trust the police. But on the other hand, there are a lot of people who do. Perhaps people who've actually maybe had their lives saved by police officers, or maybe had police officers intervene when they've been burgled and that sort of thing. So really, and I think what is important is that Henry's family want to find out what the
Yes.
process was. And they don't want to see what happened in Southampton last night either.
No,
They may not.
they've been amazing when you hear them. I mean, I don't know how, because the worst thing that can happen to you as a family is have a child die or be killed. And they've been amazing because again, they didn't speak out much prior to the verdict. And
Well, again, like I say, they wouldn't.
they
They
wouldn't.
don't.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
because you can't basically in this country. You can't start
No.
talking about it till you've
And
got a verdict.
And I think, and I've looked at the leaders of the Sikh community. The perpetrator was a Sikh, and they have spoken in the strongest terms against what happened and saying this does not represent our community because they're afraid, obviously, that in this kind of hyper world we live in, and I think the other discussion is, you know, what are police doing? And I think I'm willing to see the process go through, but I think at the same time, you can be horrified by what you saw in that body cam video.
Mm. Yes, I think that is the problem for the police at the moment, is that everybody is horrified by that. It doesn't look right to many people. That's what they're saying. It doesn't look like there was any need to handcuff him. And there should have been, well, the unfortunate phrase is that I don't think you have, mate, referring to I've been stabbed. That's very unfortunate. But again, you know, all I can say is that we just have to wait and see what the complaints
Right.
procedure comes up with. As far as the Sikh community is concerned, I don't know if you know, but the Sikh community in Southampton is the biggest religious minority in Southampton. They've been established there since just after the war, and very much established in that sort of central area of the city as well. And I think what I've read today is that one spokesperson said, you know, what this guy did is not, he's not a Sikh, basically. You
Right.
know, it's not what we do.
That's right.
So yeah, they're very worried that you know, their entire community, which is pretty well respected in Southampton and always has been, they're worried that this will be a huge problem for their entire community, and that would be wrong because this is one person's actions. And you know, there is one person who is responsible for this, not a
And
whole
look,
community.
that's exactly the right
And
point
can I
because
just add as well
yes,
that the same goes if the police officers are found to have been negligent, that it is because one of the other problems in Southampton at the moment is one officer has been misidentified on social media and has had to go into hiding because there are two police officers, or even three in Hampshire Constabulary of the same name. So people are getting the wrong end of the stick all the time, and this has had a big impact on one particular officer, apparently.
no, it's
Which
true, and that
again
that
is
was
just
that was the point I was just going to make. If these officers, you know, I don't know what level they're going to be held accountable, and what the report will show, but that's not the whole police force. And it's like even back, and I've made reference, I know, to George Floyd a couple of times, mainly because of the "I can't breathe" statement that the victim made, that Henry made, but that you know. The police officers in that particular situation were tried and were, you know, but that doesn't represent the entire Minneapolis police force. So we've got to be very careful about, you know, not, you know, using a wide brush with people and get to the bottom of it. And we need to let ourselves do that. I like to say all the time that we don't let people make mistakes anymore. We don't let people make mistakes and then take it, be able to take responsibility for that. We just want to blame everybody. And um, part of that I think is social media, because it's like we do not have the bandwidth to care about everything all the time everywhere. I mean, it just can't be done. But social media expects us to do that, or we allow social media to expect us to do that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will say we don't allow people to make mistakes anymore because people are more accountable now and should be more accountable. But you're right. I mean, the thing is that this was a gigantic mistake, basically. But it is time for cool heads, basically. And it seems at the moment that the only cool head is actually this poor lad's family and
Hmm.
his dad, and he should be listened to. I think that's the person to listen to. I mean, we've got politicians today in Parliament. Now they're all talking about the guidelines. And, I mean, guidelines about how to deal with different religions and different minorities and different ethnic groups came about because of massive injustice to certain sectors of society. That's how it all started. But politicians are now saying maybe it's gone a bit too far. Maybe we have got to get back to treating everybody equally. Um, and
You
that's
know,
going to be an
I
interesting debate.
I wrote a book in 2006 called Indivisible: Uniting Values for a Divided America. And one of the chapters in that book, and I'm actually right now working on updating it because we have the same problems we had 20 years ago, and in some ways they're worse. But I had a chapter in there called The American Pendulum. And I think this could be true for any society. We take good ideas, and we go too far with them. And then we have to come back and find where the right place is. So, why it's a great idea to be mindful of minorities, to be mindful of how people are treated, to be mindful of differences in groups and things like that. If you go so far in that direction, then you end up discriminating against other groups of people that you never intended to discriminate against. So you got to find that middle ground.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that we're all minorities, really.
Yeah, really.
We are,
Yeah, one way or another, depending on where you
even if
are.
even if you represent or are part of the biggest ethnic group in your city, that is split into myriads of different ideas. So yeah, it's worth remembering that we all have our own minority traits. But I just can't keep saying enough. We have to wait to see what happens. What the results of the inquiries are.
And I think be respectful of the family, as you've mentioned a couple of times. We're going to shift gears a little bit and go to another topic. Uh, uh, Ben Leo, who's a reporter for GB News, and he's based out of Washington. So he does a show for them that kind of goes over American news and British news and that kind of thing. But he went to cover. We've had this controversy, this riot. They're just about riots every night outside of this ICE detention facility in New Jersey that has been around for 25 years. I mean, three different presidents have detained people in this particular facility. And there's been protests that would lead to riots, depending on the time of day, over the last 2 weeks about. And so he got caught in a kind of a back and forth with, wasn't really a back and forth, but an argument with somebody that I thought was really interesting because of how he handled it, number one, and number two, that the guy was so angry about British colonialism, which I guess is like the go-to anytime you deal with a Brit. Sometimes you go to British colonialism. Um, I would argue that yes, there was British colonialism and a lot of bad things happened there, but the Brits were also the first country to outlaw slavery and spent a lot of resources to end it. And great countries, including ours, came out of the British system. And so I think you have to have some balance there too. But did you get to watch that interaction? What'd you think about it?
Yes, I have watched it. What do I think about it? I don't know really whether. I want to, you know, how we talked last time, you know, about my impartiality standards and things like that, you know, and how I don't, you know, I'm always giving the views of other people rather than myself. I suppose that I can talk as a journalist and
Yeah.
imagine how I would have reacted to that.
I think he tried to
And
stay calm. I mean, you know,
well, he did manage to stay
yeah,
calm. Yes, he
yes,
did manage to stay calm. I mean, let's, you know, he will get criticised by some people who are not particularly on his side that it was a bit of baiting, you know,
mm.
and it was, but that's not my viewpoint. I'm just saying that's what some people will say. Others will say he was remarkably calm, and it made a very interesting bit of television.
It did.
Um,
And one you can't play though, mostly because you'd have to bleep most of it out from the other
well,
guy's
what I've
perspective.
seen
That's
is
right.
mostly
I just don't, you know,
Mm.
it's funny. They are, just to give an update, they have uh, brought, you know, started doing some arrests. They've gotten some cooperation from the local police in addition to the ICE agents, and they are arresting people. I mean, somebody was on video saying they were gonna, you know, go after this ICE agent and kill his whole family. Well, you can't do that. You know, you can't threaten to kill somebody and then expect not to get arrested. So,
But do you
um,
know if they've arrested the man that threatened to break the journalist's jaw?
I don't know. I
No,
don't know.
that's
Yeah.
because I thought another interesting thing that came out of that clip was the reaction of your police officers, or shall we say, the lack of reaction. You
Yes.
know, there was a pretty major confrontation going on there, and none of the police intervened at all. And not only that, but I think they did tell him to go away, which is
Yep.
again a strange kind of response to a working journalist.
No, I agree 100%. So let's move on to one more topic. It's Pride Month, and uh, it's funny because in New York City, which is kind of where the Pride Parade started back in I think it was the 80s, maybe the late 70s. Um,
68, actually, Stonewall riots,
oh, that's right.
68.
That's
Yeah.
right. So it was mainly originally about gay men. And this year on the panel in New York, that was organizing the parade, they did not have any gay men. It was all different other kinds of, you know, whatever the pride groups of people are. And a friend of mine who is gay and lives in New York said, you know, we're not even good enough to be in the pride parade anymore because we've become so mainstream, being a gay male. We've become so mainstream that now, you know, we're not even on the panel anymore. So over here, there are certain cities that it's very big in. I mean, and all the major companies in America will have the pride flag in their logos for June. All their advertising will have it. Sometimes they even have it at, uh, they may even have it at some of the World Cup games that are in June on the field with the logos. So, but the White House is not recognizing the way Democratic White Houses have recognized it. They're not going to have a party on the lawn like they usually do when Democrats are in power. Um, how is it being perceived in the UK?
Well, this year, working on covering York Pride in the city of York, for the first time, I really got to the bottom of some of the fears of people who were at Pride. And I did a special on my Sunday show, on my Sunday late night show about that. Basically, people in the community are very worried that the tide is turning. Now, there is plenty of evidence for that, particularly now the community is so much larger now and so many people identify with it. So you have the big, you know, the debate about trans rights, but actually it even goes down to a fear for the future of same-sex marriage. There are people that I talk to in the York Pride who think that rollback will be severe, and they are extremely concerned. And do you know what? Why shouldn't they be? Because if you go back to the 1920s, for instance, the best place to go and be gay was Germany. And look how that panned out. So it's not as if things can't change. they can change dramatically. My own personal view about how much they change is that I think with the internet and with so much communication between people now, I think any political party that tried to change things dramatically, it would get quite a lot of opposition, because it is clear when you look at the people who go to Pride in York, the people that go to watch it, there are many straight family groups that are there. And again, any kind of new discrimination in the future will meet the same response that discrimination did in the early 60s. You know, it wasn't necessarily gay people that caused change in the 60s. It was the politicians and their families who decided that enough was enough, and actually we didn't need this kind of discrimination, and there was nothing wrong with them. Yes, I mean, don't get me wrong, the protests from gay people were massive, Stonewall riots and all that were very important, but there was a lot of backing from families who thought that this kind of discrimination on people that they loved was wrong. So hopefully any major attempt to turn the tide back will be met with the same support from other communities.
I tend to think that there won't be rollback. I think that the embedding in the community. I mean, look, we have an openly gay Secretary of the Treasury in the United States that's married and has 2 children, and he's probably the highest ranking. We had a guy run for president, same kind of situation, and so and I think churches are being more open to this too. But anyway, we've got to wrap up now because we're running out of time. But I do appreciate you being with us today, and we look forward to talking again. I love having these discussions. Thank you, David.
It's been great to see you again. Take care.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.